if it is not already. Okay, so I'm now going to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. and I'm going to begin today with a land acknowledgement. The Mount Allison Students Union operates and carries out its work on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. This territory is covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties, which this nation first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey title and established the rules for what was supposed to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We, the staff and members of the SAC, pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land. So, first order of business, I am seeking a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting. Thank you, Councillor Minosha McKenney. I'm seeking a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding the agenda for today's meeting? Go ahead, Councillor Minosha McKenney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add one item to open forum, feedback from the academic strategic plan.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Just going to note that. Is there any more amendments? Sorry, I'm just making note. So if I have no further amendments, we'll take it to a vote. Y for yes, N for no, and A to abstain to the agenda with this amendment made by Councillor Minosha McKenney. Okay, so the agenda has passed with the amendment. Now we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes. I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on November 14th. Thank you, Councillor Nolan. And now I'm seeking a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Minosha McKenney. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or amendments to make to the minutes? Go ahead, Councillor Noss.
It's like a really small thing, but like at this point, I'm just kind of like, I don't know what to say. I've noticed that my name has been misspelled, and like not just me, but other counselors too in the minutes a few times. So it's not a big thing, but just wanted to point it out.
Is your name misspelled in this current minutes as well?
Yes, it is. It's like 2 or 3 times, but it's
are you seeking
in the
So are you seeking to motion for amendments to the minutes where the names are changed that have been misspelled? Or is it more of a comment?
I'm gonna motion anything. It's more of a general comment. Yeah.
More of a general comment. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for making that comment. It's appreciated. Does anyone else have any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Okay. Now we're going to take it to vote. Y for yes, N for no, and A to abstain on the approval of the minutes from the November 14th meeting. Great, so we have now passed and approved the minutes from our last meeting. So I'm not sure if I saw our guest come in, but we have a guest this week to council. Oh, I believe I see the name. Yes, okay, so our first, we have a presentation today, a little meet and greet from the newly appointed Sexual Violence Prevention and Education Coordinator, Dr. Tazia Alexopoulos. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. but please take the floor, turn your camera on, and let me know. Do you have any documents or anything you need me to share as well?
No documents. I don't know why my camera isn't working. Let's try that again.
Yeah, we can take a sec to troubleshoot that.
There,
lovely.
perfect. Okay. Great. So I can just go ahead.
Yep, please go ahead, take the floor.
Great. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce myself to everybody, tell you a little bit about this new position and some of what's kind of happening at the university right now around sexual violence prevention and education. So my name is Dr. Tasia Alexopoulos. You were very, very close. Well done. And yeah, I've actually been at Mount Allison since 2014. I've taught in gender studies and history. So I've been around for quite a while. So I'm new to the role, but not new to the university. So as most of you probably are aware, this is a new role. It's part of the creation of a new office to deal specifically with sexual violence. Not only prevention and education, but also support and intake and disclosure. So basically the entire structure of how the university is dealing with this issue is in the process of changing quite radically. So it's really exciting to be here. It's really exciting to be in this role. I'm just going to give you a quick breakdown of some of the major things that are happening right now. And then I just wanted to make sure folks had an opportunity to ask questions if they had any. And yeah, just really the purpose of this was to say hello, so you know my face, so you know my name, because I imagine I'll be working quite closely with many of you. So there's a couple of major things that we're working on right now. And the first one is probably the one that many of you are the most concerned about is revising the sexual violence policy. So the standalone policy that the university has. Right now, we do have an interim policy, but we're working on revising that. And we're working on not only revising the policy, but we're also separating the policy and the procedure, which was a big issue in the past. So there will be two different documents now. One with policy, which should always be separate from procedure. So we're working on really clarifying what pathways for the procedure will look like. So how do you disclose sexual violence? How do you file a complaint? What will those pathways look like? What are the supports we have now? What are the supports that we need to cultivate for survivors? So that's what we're working on right now. With the policy piece, we're working with the VP's Advisory Committee on Sexual Violence, which was the working group on sexual violence last year. So when the kind of Me Too MTA thing kind of started last year, this is a continuation of that policy. And one of the things that we're looking at really closely is ensuring that the language of the policy is updated and reflects current understandings of what sexual violence is, that it's survivor-centered, and that it's trauma-informed. So those two things, being survivor-centered and trauma-informed, are two of the most important things that we're trying to keep in mind as we move forward. So we want to make sure that the policy not only establishes Mount Alice's position on sexual violence, so A, that it's not tolerated, and B, that it's a systemic issue that we have to change a lot of things to address, but also that the policy doesn't marginalize or stigmatize or create any new barriers for survivors who want to come forward with their experiences. And the same will go for the procedure aspect as well. Right now, there is a lot of overlap in who you talk to, where you go. It's not very clear. And so there have historically been quite a lot of issues around disclosing sexual violence at this university. So we want to make sure that the procedure is extremely clear, that there are no overlapping functions or conflicts, and that the parties that are involved are obvious, transparent, and that students are able to access the procedure really easily and can follow it really easily. Right now, it's very, very difficult to even know what you're supposed to do if you do want to disclose sexual violence or not. So that's kind of the big thing we're working on now. There's a draft of the policy, a working draft of the policy. So we're hoping to have a more complete draft by mid-December. So moving forward after the Christmas break, we can really start finalizing what it will look like, which is really exciting. And the procedure will follow. So hopefully by the spring, we will have policy and procedure in place. So that's that piece. The other part, of course, is training and education. So that's kind of my role in the office. And what we're looking at is we're right now encouraging training. So we're encouraging the Seeds of Change bystander intervention training from Sexual Violence NB. Most of you should have gotten an email from me about that. We're encouraging all students, staff, and faculty to take that training in their own time. It's a really wonderful set of modules that not only educates people about what sexual violence is, but what they can do to intervene if they have to, but also intervene in how the culture works around sexual violence, which I think is a really big issue at Mount A. So we're really pushing that training. We're also pushing training out for staff and faculty. So a couple of weeks ago, we did an all-day training with staff and faculty on the ABCDs of sexual violence disclosure, and 62 staff and faculty participated and completed the training. And that was during reading week. So it was pretty impressive that so many people came. That wasn't mandatory. So people are engaging with the training on their own time, which is really great. So yeah, so the Seeds of Change is available to everybody. It's online. It was originally on Moodle, and some of you may have completed it on Moodle. But as you know, Moodle's not great. So it was really glitchy. There were a lot of issues with it. So it's now on an online platform that's separate from the university. But while it was on Moodle, almost 500 people signed up to complete it, which is a great start. So those kind of large scale trainings we're encouraging now, because in the future, we'd like to do them in a more established, potentially mandatory way at the beginning of the year, so that everyone coming to Mount Allison has the same basic knowledge about what sexual violence is and what their rights and responsibilities are around sexual violence on campus. And yeah, that's what we've been working on since I started, which was mid-October. So it's been pretty intense, but it's been great. Lots of really good conversations with students, staff, and faculty who are really motivated to change how the system works right now and to make the campus safer for everyone. So all very exciting stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of inform everyone what's going on. I know there's a lot of kind of uncertainty right now. And, it's kind of good to just have a platform like this to get some of this information out. So if anyone has any questions or needs anything clarified, I'm more than happy to take some questions or comments. And if not, I'll leave you to your meeting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexopoulos. That was super informative, and it's great to hear some steps that are being made in the direction that you guys are taking. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything that was discussed, or I don't know, anything relating to this? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Minosha McKenney.
Sorry, this is just a really quick question, but for students who've already taken the module on like Moodle, would they have to retake it on the new platform?
No, you can retake it on the new platform if you want a certificate of completion. So right now, if you did it on Moodle, you get like a Moodle badge, which is just a badge. But if you did complete it again on the online portal, you would actually get a certificate of completion. That we're kind of working on that right now because it's operated by SVNB, which is Sexual Violence New Brunswick, who are stretched very thin. We don't want to ask them to manually create certificates for 500 people, but that is something we are working on right now to potentially have folks get the certificates who now have the badges, but that's kind of looking a little more forward. But yes, you can get a certificate now if you recomplete it. Otherwise, you can show your Moodle badge to people.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Counselor Hanikowski, with your question.
Hello.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Tassia. Thank you for coming. It's really appreciated. So I have a couple of questions. My first one is, I'm just wondering when the other individual that will work alongside you, in terms of responding to disclosures, when that individual will be hired and what is being done in the meantime for students that need to disclose, and what are the procedures in place like this school year at this time. And what do you think the university could do, or is there anything that you could do in your position so that that's more clear? Because since the beginning of the school year, I've been really unclear as to what those procedures are. And I realize that it's a really difficult time because everything is being redone, and that's fantastic. And that's going to take the time that it needs to take. But just wondering about like the interim time during that.
Yeah, all very good questions. Thank you. So the intake and disclosures position is in the process of being posted now. So we really, really, really hope that we have someone very soon. Originally, the university only approved one position. So we were a little late getting the intake and disclosure position on the road. But the VP has been pushing it really, really hard through HR to try and get it out there fast, but also to make sure that the job description is accurate and that we get a pool of people with the skills that we need. So we need like people who have their masters of social work, who have a lot of counseling experience. So people who bring the qualifications that we actually need to the table. So that's been a little bit of a process, but I think that the job description now that we've settled on is going to be like draw really excellent candidates who can really support students. So that should be something that we see happening in the next few weeks. Interview processes, that's something you can't really, those can be really, really long or really, really short, depends. But we're really hoping that by the new year, there is a person in that position. So right now, I agree, the policy and the procedure are a bit unclear. And that is something we are working on. So right now, if you look at the website, there is a page for referral and reporting. And there is an interim policy and procedure and kind of a little brief overview of what to do if you want to disclose or make a complaint. But it's not very clear. It's not very easy to get to. So right now, we're just in the process of getting that on the website. So what the procedure looks like. So right now, if somebody wants to disclose sexual violence, they can disclose to the counselors at MTA. So that's the student development counselors, Jessica Griffin and Renee Carew, and they are managing the disclosures. So they can be reached through like the Wellness Center. You can also email counselor@mta.ca, which is an email only they see. If you're booking through like your OWL booking thing, how you book your counseling appointments, you can actually make an appointment for a disclosure directly through that system that they use, and they manage the disclosures. So somebody who just wants to disclose so that they can access certain resources or have accommodations, etc., a disclosure isn't necessarily a complaint, right? So students should feel comfortable making appointments with the counselors, even if they don't want to move forward with a formal complaint, that they just need some support, right? So that's one thing we're really trying to make clear is a disclosure and a complaint are two different things. You can disclose a sexual violence incident or experience in order to access resources. You don't have to go forward with a formal complaint, but if you do, that's also the gateway to that is the counselors. That way we know students are being offered the services that they need to get support through that process. And right now what that looks like is if you want to make a complaint, so the steps are disclosure, so you can pathway out to resources and just end it there if you want, or you can file a complaint, and you have two choices for a complaint at the moment. And that is an investigative complaint or a non-investigative complaint. So in the past, this used to be called informal and formal, and that we've eradicated that language because it's really problematic. So a non-investigative complaint is one where the resolution is agreed upon or enforced So you could say, for example, I just don't want this person Snapchatting me anymore. That's something that both parties can agree on, or the university can say, hey, stop Snapchatting this person. However, if you wanted to make an investigative complaint, the university would engage a third-party investigator who would write a report and submit it to the university, and the university would then take disciplinary action beyond what could be agreed upon, or just made without certain kinds of evidence. So right now, most people prefer to resolve things or move through the non-investigative approach, because you can ask for things like, I want education sessions for this person, or I just want us to have a no contact order. And a lot of times complainants and respondents can agree on these things, and it can be a shorter process in some instances. But in some instances, the investigative option is the only option for people. So this just opens up what survivors can do, right? So it's not just like you have to complain in a certain way to get certain things done. We're trying to really engage with different ways and different pathways of moving forward through a resolution. So that's what it looks like right now. The last part of your question, I wrote down can do, and I actually don't remember what it was. Sorry.
Oh no, I think you actually covered it. That was super
Okay.
helpful. I guess I
Okay.
just had a branch off question from what you had said. So the counselors that are currently taking in disclosures, would they then let a student know that they have the two options?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so the counselors, when you make an appointment to disclose, they'll go over your options with you. So they'll say, you have the option to get resources. If you just want to disclose to talk about it a little while, then you leave, that's fine. But you also have these procedural options as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
That was a very informative answer. Thank you, Tassia. That was really helpful.
Oh, no problem.
We have another question in the chat here from Counselor Sohil. They asked, what is the best way to reach you?
So my email address is talexopoulos@mta.ca. So if you look up my name in the directory or look up sexual violence prevention education, it's just that email for now. On our agenda for the next week is setting up all the social media accounts. So that will be another option for getting in touch with me. But right now it's just my email. So it's talexopoulos@mta.ca.
Great. I'm just going to add that to the chat in case anybody wants to.
Oh, thank you. I guess I could have also put that in the chat.
It's okay. I'm just making sure I'm spelling your last name correctly. I have a tricky last name too. I know what that's like. I think that should be correct. Please.
It's
not,
but here, I'll do it. Let me just.
Okay. Everybody.
There's only one U in my name, but that is.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Okay,
Thank you for editing that. Perfect.
Yeah, it's fine.
Lovely.
I'm sure you're used to it too.
Yeah. Does anybody have any further questions or comments now that they want to pose to Cassia before we move on? No rush to move on either. If anyone has any questions, please pose them. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Sohil.
Thank you so much. I just had a question, just based off of your contact information. I guess I just wanted to ask, are you available in case of emergencies? And if there is an emergency related to this topic, would we still email you, or is there any other resource?
So no. So if there's an emergency, like if there's a life-threatening emergency, or if someone has been harmed, call campus security or 911. My position is in no way an emergency position, and it's not a response, intake, or disclosure position. So I don't have contact with students in crisis. For example, the intake and disclosure person, that will be the person who does all of those intakes and disclosures eventually. But in the case of an emergency situation, I would use the resources available to you for emergencies. In terms of sexual violence emergencies, you can also call the Sexual Violence New Brunswick crisis line. And I can post that for you. And that right now, because of a lack of funding and volunteers, is only operating from, I think, 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. I think 7 days a week. Let me just grab that number. But yes, so right now, we don't have a dedicated like sexual violence emergency line. And in the past that has kind of existed, but in an informal way that hasn't necessarily been in line with best practices.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Here, I will post the support line. So this is Sexual Violence New Brunswick, and they do really wonderful work with survivors in the community and across New Brunswick as well. So a really, really good resource. If folks haven't checked out their website, I would definitely go check it out. Lots of really great resources there. So
Great, thanks. That's a great resource as well to add. Do you have any further questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any more pop up. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. That was super informative.
Yeah,
and
my
helpful.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. And please feel free to folks email me, like if you have questions or you want to come chat about what's going on. I'm at the university in person, so really I'm there anytime to chat. So, and if you need things clarified or want even just like updates on the progress of things, yeah, don't hesitate.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much.
Bye, enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Bye everyone, thank you.
All right, so after that lovely presentation, we're going to move on to reports, starting with Counselor Burke. So take it away, Counselor Burke.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this is less like a formal report on my mandate and more so a report for information for you folks. So as you may already know, myself and Counselor Ehlers sit on the NBSA, the New Brunswick Student Alliance, as directors on their board, and I was elected to chair this year. So often in my reports, I talk on what we're doing, and I've spoken several times on the fact that we've passed policies at the board level, and so I thought it would be important for the board to see the policies that we've passed, and as well just to see if there is any feedback on them, particular because it is Advo Week next week, which is a really big deal, and so I've also put our Advo Week document in this report for you folks to take a look at, and it's conclusive of all the asks that we are going to be, or it contains all the asks that we're going to be bringing to Advocacy Week, which is where we meet with post-secondary institution administrators, we meet with MLAs, MPs, and several ministers for the government of New Brunswick. These policies have really, as you may have noticed, guided a lot of our asks, and some of them specifically like the provincial inquiry into systematic racism, elimination of student loan interest, like those are direct asks in our advocacy document. I will also note, after this agenda was circulated, I did notice 2 typos in the provincial inquiry to systematic racism policy, where there's just like random numbers that shouldn't be there, and I will be letting our executive director know that, so those can be edited out. And all these policies are on the MBSA website as well. There's expired versions of them for some of them that have just been updated, so you can go back and see how they may have changed to previous policies. And then, yeah, this is the lovely Advo doc. So this year we're titling it Investing in New Brunswick through Investing in Post-Secondary Education. So what we've learned is that the Blaine Higgs government is a tough government to crack. And a good way to get some of our asks through is to acknowledge the fact that there would be investments back on their end as well if they invest in students. And so that's what we tried to really center this document around, is how a lot of these asks as well, how retention, international immigration, and those sorts of things. Yeah, and I would love to answer any questions on our asks. I will also shout out Nate, and who is on our council. Shout out Nate, he's coming to Advo Week as a student delegate, and as well we have another student from Mount Allison, Oliver Batchilder. I 100% said his last name wrong, so my apologies there. But super excited. We had our Advo Week training on Saturday. So that was 4 hours where we just sat down and talked about like the current political landscape in New Brunswick and our asks, and got to meet our student delegates. And tomorrow is my first advocacy meeting. I'm meeting with the Green Party Caucus to bring forward this advocacy document. And yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to add. Maybe just that we've already, the MBSA, the board of directors, already met with PEDAL, which is the minister, PEDAL, which is post-secondary education, training, and labor. And it's really exciting because a lot of our asks are priorities for this minister this year. And it's looking like, although obviously the premier has final say, it's looking like a lot of our asks are going forward as well from PEDAL, and we might see reflections in the budget or this year, and we could call those huge wins. So we're having another meeting with PEDAL just next week, not next week, sometime either next week or the week after. Still need to schedule it, but to discuss how we can collaborate further on some of these asks, and particularly in regards to the international student loan ask. So that is new. It's never been in our document before, but we're asking that international students be able to apply for provincial student loans. And that was something that they thought was really interesting. And they told us that international students is their #1 priority this year. And so they want to meet with us to figure out maybe not exactly that ask, but how they can better support students. And so that's something they hadn't even thought about, was including them into student loans. And they want to hear that out, flesh out that idea with us, and see how they can support us in bringing that forward to the government and to the premier. So yes, and I will note as well that our Affordable Education Committee this year, I am the only student on it who is not an international student. So we have a lot of international student voices around the table specific to affordability, and I don't want to like act like I did the work on that ask. That was entirely the amazing students on that committee, and really excited that we're getting more students that are not just board directors on that committee to help us flesh out that idea moving forward. Yeah. So that was my long, lengthy MBSA report.
Great. No, thank you so much for sharing. It's super exciting to see what's going on in the province beyond just our university. Does anybody have any questions about MBSA or Advo Week or the Advo document, anything that we can direct to Councillor Burke now? Go ahead, Councillor Lesser.
This is entirely a comment, not a question. I know that Councillor Burke mentioned that I am going to be attending Advo Week, and I just wanted to shout out in the advocacy document, it kind of got skipped over, the ask related to e-mental health resources. We're going to be advocating for the province to provide, provincial access to all universities to e-mental health resources, which I know a pain point with Mount Allison's mental health services is that it's been very hard to get an appointment. Having e-mental health resources will alleviate that and help people get access to help when mental health services that currently exist wouldn't really be able to. So it's definitely something for everybody on the council and everybody in the student body watching to look out for. I'm really hoping that goes through.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Lesser. That's a super exciting resource that could be coming soon. It's awesome. Any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Mirardi.
Hi, I was just wondering if you're still, MBSA is still accepting applications for people who are willing to join the Advocacy Week?
Unfortunately, we're not accepting applications for Advo Week, but we do have a meeting with the Mount A administration, and I'm sure if you wanted to attend that one, we could bring you along since it's right on our campus to speak on this document. I would just have to send you the training materials for you to review if you were interested.
That would be great. I'll contact you about that. Thank you.
That's perfect.
Great, awesome. Do we have any more questions about MBSA, AdvoDoc, Advo Week? Comments? Okay.
I actually do have a question, sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Noss.
I just wondered, does the MBSA have like a scheduled meeting with the premier, like himself?
No, so the premier will not like take a meeting with us. And so how it used to work was when the Liberal government was the lead, we would just meet with the Liberal caucus and present this advocacy document. And the premier isn't like interested in hearing directly from advocacy groups. Instead, he asked that they meet with the ministers individually, and then the ministers bring things up to him. So it makes things a little bit harder on our end advocacy wise, scheduling meetings, but luckily we have meetings set up with almost every minister to move this document basically forward and up to him.
Great, that's a good question. Do you have any more questions or comments? Please indicate with a Q in the chat or a question in the chat. Go ahead, Councillor Mirardi.
Hey, sorry, I was wondering if you could give us the name of the ministers that you're going to be meeting with. Like, do you know how many of them are going to be meeting with?
Yeah, so I just might need a second to pull up like the master list of our meetings, if that's okay. Sorry, it's just going to take a couple seconds. I can tell you that we already met with the Minister of Petal, Trevor Holder, and we will be meeting with him again, but this one's going to be more of a collaboration meeting. And honestly, he's been amazing in setting up meetings with other ministers as well, because often they take a while to get back to us. But some of the other ministers that we've been talking to, sorry, this is just taking a while. I'll just drop it in the chat if that works.
I was gonna suggest that, Councillor Burke, if you could drop their names in the chat and people can go through them at their leisure and interest. That would be great. Is there any more questions? Okay, so Councillor Burke will be dropping that list into the chat as well for people to browse regarding the meetings with MBSA and sorry, Councillor Burke, who were the meetings with again? My apologies, I just don't want to say the wrong.
Oh, so we're not just meeting with ministers, we're also meeting with Green Party members, the Green Party caucus, different MLAs, like the head of the Liberal government, and then as well the executives of each institutions in which we are members. There's like not like a MAFA, we're not meeting with MAFA, but we're meeting like with the MAFA of New Brunswick. I apologize that I don't know their name off the top.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Thank you for clarifying that for me. So now we're going to move on to Councillor Ehler's report. So please take it away.
Thank you so much. And also the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. Councilor Burke. There's like a few other stakeholders in the middle. Yeah, there's only 3 things. Well, first of all, I hope everyone's doing well. We're almost there. Good luck, everyone, on the final projects and such. I only want to highlight 3 things from my report. So first is the airport shuttle. You can continue to book the airport shuttle until December 6th. It's running the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th for booking to go home, and then the 8th and 9th to book to come back. So please take advantage of this if it's a service that you're interested in. That's all I'd have to say with that. I'd be happy to take any questions. The next is the hospital. So I was informed that there were questions the last time about the hospital, and I know it's a discussion point later on, so I won't get too deep into it, but I just wanted to say that I've been continuing to have meetings with university admin and also the Rural Health Action Group and different groups that include the mayor of the town of Sackville and other stakeholders and community members. And so I don't have a specific concrete update, but I can guarantee council that there are really serious meetings happening. I actually ran into Mayor Michaud earlier today, and he said that he's meeting with the CEO of Horizon Health tomorrow to discuss next steps for recruitment and also just for what ifs and other hospital related topics. The hospital was also a conversation brought up with my meeting with our local MP, Dominic LeBlanc, that I'll touch on later. And so there are conversations happening surrounding the hospital. Excuse me. And I want to guarantee that there's massive representation at a lot of these meetings and student representation. So like I said, it's a discussion point later on, and I'd be happy to take specific questions, even for follow-up, if you'd like something specific for one of us to look into, but I'll leave it at that for now. The current state is that the ER is still closed after 4 p.m. every day of the week. But as always, students can call 911 if there is an emergency. Please don't feel like you can't do that. You'll be taken to Moncton, and that's kind of where we're at. Wanted to briefly point out the MBSA point. Thank you so much, Councillor Burke, for touching on that in our advocacy week. We're really excited. I also included a few notes from our meeting with Minister Holder that we already had, which is really exciting. Some cool next steps there if you're interested. And finally, wanted to highlight my meeting with Minister LeBlanc. I was scheduled a meeting last week or the week before, which was great. It went really well. And the only main point I wanted to touch on was the Vote on Campus program. I was really optimistic because he had also expressed frustration about the Vote on Campus program not happening this year. And so he had stated that the Liberal Party is interested in legislating the program so that it will always be brought to campuses for future elections, whether they are snap elections or whether they are planned. So that was really exciting to hear, and I'm hopeful that they will move forward on this. I have been in contact with Minister LeBlanc since our meeting ended, and he's been really good at following up with me and letting me know where things are at. So he requested some further documentation, I suppose, from CASA and on mental health and on various others, and he's already emailed me back saying his thanks and that he's going to be using documents written by students when making motions and suggestions in Parliament, which is really cool. So I don't know, I consider that piece on the Vote on Campus a win. Take some things with a grain of salt, I suppose, but hoping that that moves forward. And that's all that I really wanted to touch on. Happy to take questions or comments or anything at all.
Great, thank you, Councillor Ehler. That was a lovely report. Does anybody have any questions or comments to direct now to Councillor Ehler? Please hold your questions regarding the hospital to our designated discussion period on that. But any other comments would be great. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions currently. Any further questions can always be directed by email to any member that you hear from today. So we're going to move on to Councillor Robinson's report. Unfortunately, she came down with a bit of a stomach bug today, so she's unable to be at today's meeting, but Councillor Burke can answer any questions about this report, or questions can be emailed directly to Councillor Robinson. So I'll pause for a moment if anybody has any questions or comments that Councillor Burke might be able to assist in answering. But if not, we will move on. Thank you, Councillor Burke, for the list. The list of meetings for the NBSA has been posted in the chat. Okay, so we are going to move on to a report from Councillor Kruger. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to keep this really short and brief. I basically just wanted to update the council on what I've been up to the last month or so. So we discussed the strategic academic plan in the University Planning Committee. I raised some issues or some questions that I've indicated in the report with some responses from the provost. But the committee has approved that to go to Senate. The other thing is I submitted a very early draft kind of report of the scholarships and bursaries issue, like a proposal to the provost, who is the chair of the Senate and Bursaries Committee. But I'm going to go back over the Christmas break and work on really refining it and hashing it out and just making it as strong as it can be with Councillor Minoka McKenney and Councillor Nolan. So I'm absolutely still taking feedback on that, and I will totally provide the council with an update once it's a little bit more set in stone. But yeah, please feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kruger. Does anybody have any questions on her update or about the Scholarship and Bursary Committee? Okay. If we have no further questions or comments, we are now going to scroll back up to business arising from the minute. I'm just going to pull the agenda up here so we can work off that. So Councillor Burke has a few responses to questions that were brought up at our last meeting. So Councillor Burke, please go ahead with those.
Yeah, I'll also really quickly note, I know I noted some ministers in the chat. I also didn't add, but Minister Holder is bringing forward our mental health ask to the Minister of Health, Dorothy Shepherd, as well. So we're hoping that a meeting might come out of that. And then we're also meeting with the commissioner in regards to our ask on systematic racism. So yeah, anyways, back to business arising from the minute. So there was a few questions last week regarding the hospital and a few that I directly brought back to the university to ask. So Councillor Hanikowski had asked about the wellness center and there being one doctor as opposed to there previously being two doctors in the wellness center. So I did ask about that. So the answer to that question was that Dr. Thomas retired from the hospital, and when he retired from the hospital, he also retired from our wellness center. So there is currently one doctor in the wellness center right now, and I asked if they were looking to bring back another doctor and have that number be two. And from what I was told is that they have talked with other doctors at the Sackville Hospital about attending the clinic, and those doctors said no, but Horizon, following the meeting that the VPISA and Comfort, the mayor and Horizon had. Horizon is going to be meeting with the local doctors and ask them to do clinic hours. So Anne said she'd be following up with Horizon Health to see how that discussion went, but hopefully there's going to be a few more doctors coming into our clinic eventually. As well, Horizon did clarify in that meeting that it was just a staffing issue is the reason why the hospital's hours are reduced, and they're hoping that now that the hours are reduced, so it's not in the evenings, there'll be more doctors who, when they're not working a day, might be more reluctant to now come into our wellness center. Then as well, I asked if the merger affected the hospital at all. So I don't know if people know, but Sackville and Dorchester are going to be merging in the next year. And the merger doesn't change that front because Dorchester, their mayor and all that stuff is very, as well for the hospital coming back to its full hours. And then I asked about transportation, and I was told that, like, as I said last week, they have been speaking with the ambulances and 811 to just speak about some concerns regarding taking students, ensuring that those especially telephone lines are operating and operating quickly. And one of the things that we're doing is taxi vouchers. So we're working with Mount A to give the deans taxi vouchers to send students who are in immediate crisis to the hospital. But one of the things that I did learn is you can't necessarily call a taxi and say I'm having a medical emergency, you need to take me to the hospital. It's more like if a Dawn needed to take someone and there was that sort of thing. So we couldn't rely on them to work as an ambulance. If it's a mental health crisis, that's one thing that where a Dawn can take a student to the hospital. But if it's my leg is severely broken, a taxi is most likely not going to be taking those types of people. And then other than that, I don't know if Councillor Ehler has anything to add. I know she looked into a ride share the start of the semester, but I was also told that if students just went to Amherst and drove there, that would be no issue. So students would be allowed to go to the Amherst Hospital if they were able to find transportation there, and that would be encouraged. Yeah, so maybe I'll ask if that's okay with the chair, if Councillor Ehler had anything else that they would like to add to that response.
Yeah, Councillor Ehler, please go ahead.
Thank you. You covered it pretty well, Councillor Burke. I think the tricky thing with this situation right now are the urgent but not emergent cases, because always in the case of an emergency, you can call 911. That has not changed at all. The difficulty, if looking at prescriptions and things like that, it's really unfortunate that the ER is no longer accessible after 4 p.m. for those hours, but that isn't necessarily an urgent case. So what myself and community members have been really focusing on is the urgent but not emergent. So I don't know, I can't even think of an example of that right now. I wanted to say a broken leg, but a broken leg is kind of emergent. But you know what I mean, perhaps not life-threatening, but you don't necessarily want to wait the next day to go see someone. So in those cases, yes, absolutely, you can cross the border and go to Amherst if you have means of transportation to do so. And I mean, you can also always go to Moncton in those cases to do so, but that's kind of the group that we're really focusing on right now. We are also, in regards to the rideshare, at the end of the summer or beginning of the year, I had looked into developing a rideshare program where perhaps students would be able to drive other students to Moncton on the weekends, when this was originally a closure on the weekends only. This proved to be a lot more complex than I originally had thought. It places a lot of emotional burden on students that end up volunteering, and volunteering in the first place can be a difficult choice to make. For students, you would be committing not only time to drive there, but also the uncertainty of waiting there, not knowing perhaps how long you would be there, especially if you don't necessarily know the student. So I would welcome further conversation about it if there was a student that was interested in making this happen. But it's just something that I decided not to pursue in the end after looking into it after 4 or 5 weeks. And instead, the focus has been on preventative. Utilizing things such as 811 instead of immediately relying on a merge or calling an ambulance, using other phone helplines, finding ways to get to Amherst and calling 911. Like, we've been trying to think about preventative measures instead of the back end, what to do in the case of an emergency. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was extremely clear. It's been a very it's been a very ongoing process. It's complex, it's exhausting, and it's stressful for a lot of people in this community as well as students. But I guarantee you that we are working on it as hard and as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, thank you for that, Counselor Ehler. That sounds very complicated, and we appreciate your dedication to try and figure this out. Go ahead, Counselor Burke.
Yeah, and just the other thing that I wanted to add, and I did put in the chat, but Anne also told me that Wellness Center staff can help you figure out how urgent your concern is, and they can help you point you to resources. And then maybe the only other thing that I will add is that I know I'm the chair of the MBSA, but if the MBSA does end up getting a meeting with Minister Dorothy Shepherd, I'll definitely try to slide this one across the table while I'm there. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions to direct towards Counselor Burke and Counselor Ehler? Oh, go ahead, Counselor Ehler.
Sorry, one final thing, kind of in regards to what I had said about preventative measures. I think something that's pretty important that all of us could do to help out would be to take care of ourselves as best as we can, so that perhaps we don't end up in situations. Obviously, that's not always the case. I'm not saying we can avoid emergencies or urgent scenarios, but something that Anne and I have talked about before is making sure that you have supplies in your res room or your apartment if you're feeling unwell, throughout lozenges, medication, things like that, and just perhaps thinking ahead a little bit more than you normally would with prescriptions or other things, and just being cognizant that unfortunately this is the case right now.
Great, thank you for clarifying that as well. Is there any questions or comments to direct now regarding the hospital towards Counselor Burke and Counselor Ehler? Okay. So at the moment, I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you guys so much for that additional information. I'm sure folks really appreciate hearing about that. So without further ado, we're going to move on to new business. And I'm going to invite Tess Catcher and Annie Martell to speak on the election referenda for the WUSC Student Refugee Program.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so Tess and I are both co-presidents of the World University Services of Canada, which is also known as WUSC. We're part of the local committee here at Mount Allison. On campus, this group is mostly known for our student refugee program work that we do. So we sponsor a refugee student every 2 years, and we provide financial support for the student for a full 4 years, not fully, but at a decreasing amount each year. And we're kind of just, Tess is going to go more into the specifics, but I'm just kind of letting you all know that our local committee is wanting to hold a referendum next semester to sponsor a refugee student from Afghanistan. This year we sponsored a new student, and we're currently seeking to answer the World University Services of Canada, their call to local committees and post-secondary institutions to increase the number of sponsorships to respond to the current crisis in Afghanistan. Youth in Afghanistan right now are currently in dire need of solutions for their current displacement. And so this is why our local committee is wanting to bring a student from Afghanistan to Mount Allison. And Tess is going to go into a little bit more of the specifics of how we're planning on doing this.
So we're hoping to hold a referendum in the January referendum next semester. Keeping with the MassU guidelines, we will officially propose the actual question in the first SAC meeting next semester. This is more so a preliminary notice of our plans to our plans and thought to collaborate with the MassU to mobilize student support during the Afghanistan crisis. For full transparency, we are also approaching the university to increase their direct support. So for tuition, residence, and meal plan, and reimbursement, their support is not confirmed. Essentially, if we receive both support from the university itself and we pass the referendum, then we will be able to take on this additional sponsorship for an Afghanistan student and provide them with our traditional four-year funding model. Whereas if we pass the referendum, or we get university funding and just secure one of those resources, we will still be able to financially support an additional sponsorship for 1 year, which meets the minimum WISC requirements. And so, we can go into a little bit more in depth about our funding. Think about the referendum, will likely be asking students for a figure around $15. That is a separate fund from our $16 a year annual student levy, which will be renewed next year. We are also approaching alternative outside sources of funding, but this would be our primary mode of financial support from the student body, to hopefully bring an additional refugee student to the Mount Allison campus.
Great, thank you both for that information on the referenda. Does anybody have any questions to point their way now? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Hi, everyone, and thank you both to Students at Large Martel and Kasher for speaking about your referenda here. Thank you to Councillor Kleinknecht for adding the time in to new business today. I just wanted to make sure that they had the chance to introduce it so that we can kind of fast track the process potentially, or alleviate any questions, concerns, anything you have before the official question is asked in a January SAC meeting. So just to give everyone a more general overview of the referenda procedure, because we haven't had a referenda in a little while. There are two ways in which referenda can be initiated. One is your more traditional kind of referenda initiated by petition sort of thing, where students need to come forward with a petition containing the signatures of 25% of the student body in order to initiate. This is very rare, very rarely happens, as most referenda get initiated the other way, which is through the SAC by 2/3 majority vote to initiate a referenda. By definition, a referenda is a vote that's put to the students, so it's included on the ballots along with the ballots that are sent out for the winter or spring elections. It doesn't necessarily need to be that way, but as it works out, we'll be able to hold this referenda during the winter elections for the executive as well, which will be happening in January. So that's just kind of keep the ball rolling here. So it's my understanding, and Students at Large Martel and Kasher can correct me, but they intend to put forward the official text of their resolution, which will form the question for the referenda at the first meeting back in January of the SAC. That will require a 2/3 vote in favor in order to approve that referendum question. And then at that point, it would be added to the schedule, I guess, of things that I have to put together for the winter elections, which is executive, and then also the referenda. So I guess if anyone has any questions about the procedural element, let me know. But any questions about the substance of the referenda would be for Students at Large, Martel, or Kasher. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for that additional information, Councillor Richardson. Does anybody have any questions to direct to our Students at Large, Annie Martel and Tess? Go ahead, Councillor Burke.
Maybe it's like inappropriate to ask this question because it's not specific to the referendum, but I was just wondering like how many students we have brought to campus through this program so far.
I don't know the specific number. Tess, maybe you would know. I know that like it has been running since the late 80s, I think. But yeah, usually like we run a little bit differently than most other student refugee programs across post-secondary institutions in Canada. So our number kind of varies because of our different funding model. It's been proven really difficult for refugee students to get access to government student loans, specifically the New Brunswick provincial student loans. And so that's kind of the reason why we fund every 2 years and fund for 4 years. Yeah, so I'm not sure of the specific number, but we can definitely find that and bring that back to you.
You definitely don't have to. So I just put on the spot. I was just
no, it's all good.
Anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have any further questions, comments? So our first meeting back, this is going to be brought back to council. So it gives you all a nice chunk of time to think about this and consider. We don't have all the information because we don't have their advocacy or their document specifically relating to the referenda, but just something to think about. I don't see any further questions. Thank you all so much for coming. We are going to move on to new business. Moving on to open forum. I'm going to start with the feedback for the academic strat plan so that we can save what I'm thinking might be a longer discussion within power hours after. So if Councillor Minosha McKenney, you want to go ahead with that academic strat plan feedback, please do so now.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So about, I'd say a week ago, maybe, I forget the exact timeline, but I distributed a document to council, emailed it to everyone about the university's academic strategic plan. So this document was made under the provost's office and with 12 working groups that were focusing on 12 main categories and themes that the university academic strategic plan highlighted. So essentially, I just wanted to have this time now, if anyone had any feedback about that document that was distributed. I sent some highlights about the document in the email that I sent to everyone. As well, I marked areas I'm looking that I particularly want more feedback on, because they're either ones that I can't really speak to as much, that I know there's a lot of different views on those areas, or for other reasons as well too. But yeah, if anyone had any feedback, I can take some now, or also if you wanted to email me with anything, then that'd be very much appreciated. This document is going to be finalized in January. It'll probably be going to Senate in January or February. So preferably any feedback should come to me before the winter break. But yeah.
Great, thank you for that. A great reminder too, if people have not gotten the chance to read that in detail, to pose any questions or comments. I'm going to open up the floor now to any questions and comments, so please indicate so in the chat. I'm not seeing any comments or questions now, but if you all get the chance to read this document, feel free to email away. Thank you, Councillor Minosha McKenney. Now we're going to move on to Empower Hours discussion. So it just might have, after our previous meeting where this topic came up and it seemed like there was a lot to discuss, Councillor Burke recommended that we bring it back, which I think is a great idea. So we're going to now open the floor to Empower Hours discussions. Councillor Burke, do you have anything to say to start us off?
Yeah, I can definitely start us off. So like our chairperson said, I thought it was important to kind of bring this back to see if there was any feedback directly from council or if they had any questions. So since our last meeting, I didn't want to specifically add it to business arising from the minutes because there wasn't really specifically questions for this discussion. But since our last meeting, Councillor Fuzesi and I have met with Pierre, who's the director of athletics, and as well our entire executive met with Tasia, who we met at the start of our meeting, and to touch upon to see a few other things, but this did come up. We also have been speaking with a few students on the matter, and ultimately came up with a few other alternatives to Empower Hours itself, but we were struggling to find a solution that would be something that Pierre and the fitness center could actually operationalize. So I think it's important to note that although this is a collaboration with the fitness center, ultimately it's athletics who has to run this. And so we can provide as much feedback, and obviously we brought this idea forward, but at the end of the day, they have to be the ones to figure out all the staffing and such of how that's going to run. So we decided that what would probably be best for now, and since there's been a multitude of kind of feedback and discussion on this, is that we need to do more consultation and see what people think. And it would be best to clarify the original hours, because as we mentioned, the email that was originally sent out regarding female only hours was not the communication that we had intended to be sent. It was originally women and gender minority hours, and then following some of the discussions that Councillor Fuzesi and I had, and some conversations that I had with students, we felt that the gender minority there felt like a bit of an afterthought, and it would be best to just modify it more to instead clarify our intention. I feel like I'm rambling a bit, so I'm just going to bring it back. There is a feedback survey, obviously, and we are asking people to email myself with immediate concerns. So then we can, use some of this feedback to bring A to the fitness center, and B to help guide our consultation moving forward. But I'm just looking to see if council specifically has anything to add to this discussion.
Great, thanks, Councillor Burke. Does anybody have any comments, students at large or counselors? Go ahead, Councillor White.
Hi, I was just wondering what the turnout so far has been at Empower Hours, and what kind of feedback we're getting after changing it to Empower Hours.
If that's okay, Chairperson.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Burke.
So in terms of how many people have been attending, I'm not sure yet. So we're hoping to follow up with Pierre in a little bit to see how engagement and attendance has been, because that's also, of course, going to guide some things moving forward in terms of how long this program might last at the FC, and if students are picking up on it, along with other student feedback. And I was hoping to be able to attend myself, but unfortunately I had a meeting come up. So I don't have the answer to that question quite yet, but I do have an answer to the flip side of that question in terms of feedback. So the feedback survey, I would say, is that I've received so far, it's 70% supportive of the hours, it's 30% concerns. So some of the supports that in terms of supportiveness, some of the things that I've been reading are just that students are feeling comfortable in this space and are excited to use it. Some people directly refer to kind of personal anecdotes as to why they're really happy to see the space provided to them on campus. And we definitely have had, in terms of the clarification of who this involves, a lot of support for that as well. On the flip side, and I will note there was a few comments that were like, this is really awesome, but I would love to see like one that's like women and the gays, which I thought was kind of funny, but I don't know. Maybe it looked like a good thing to also add in our feedback, though, is that positive space for the LGBTQ plus community in general is something that students would be interested in. And then in terms of feedback of students who have concerns or are generally not happy to see that this is something on our campus, a lot of it is just around the concerns of transphobia and students that might come to these hours and have their gender identity questioned. As well, we had a few, just when it was clarified, we had a few people who were upset to see that this didn't include men as well, or like all gender minorities in terms of like trans men, people who use he, they pronouns. So those were some of the concerns. And definitely, I think in general is something that we'll be bringing forward to like different stakeholders of the university is the concern around transphobia, because I think that's obviously something that if it's present at all on our campus, we want to work towards addressing. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that answered the question. I can dive a little bit more into depth in terms of as well. Sorry. Now some of the other concerns that we were getting are just people feel like this is too much of an interim solution, and some of the intentions around like intimidation in the gym, sexual harassment, if that those concerns should be addressed at all times in the gym. So those are things that we are hearing as well. And I do want to note that there are things that we are doing to work towards, especially sexual harassment with TASIA and New Brunswick government and MBSA on larger scales, specifically working towards some of those things. But there are some other notes that we've been getting just around concerns that this might imply that males are perpetrators, or only males can be perpetrators in the gym, which I think is a valid concern. So some other things for us to think about regarding kind of communication moving forward. Yeah, I don't know if that fully answered the question, but I'd be happy to dive more into depth if I didn't just completely ramble. Yeah.
Counselor White, was that a full answer to your question? Follow up. Did we hear about the option of training our fitness center staff?
Maybe I'll ask if Counselor Fruzesi, I know I just stole that one. I think we did, I think there was some feedback that we got that just asked about training for FC staff, but Counselor Fruzesi is the one who's been working with athletics specifically about training. So if that's okay, I'll see if she has a response to this question.
Yeah, that'd be great. Counselor Fruzesi, please go ahead.
Thank you. A little bit. Training. This is something that Pierre and I have been talking a lot about over the summer. And I say mainly the summer because that's mainly when I was able to meet with them as much as I did. And over the fall, we have been checking in, and it's a real thing is that it's hard to athletic center to provide these trainings since finding staff sometimes is difficult from what Pierre has told me. I am working in a timely manner, trying to versions of these trainings out to coaches, team staff, as well as any center staff who may be working. But for now, unfortunately, the training is not available. I am hoping that this training will be available. If not next semester, the next Vice President of Student Life can be able to continue that work. But unfortunately, right now there is no training that I do foresee within the next couple of months, or not a couple of months, next couple of weeks. Sorry. I hope that answers your question, but I can definitely provide questions.
Great, thank you for the response. Councillor Burke, is your comment directly relating to that?
Yeah, I was just going to note that something as well that we've been talking about is perhaps making bystander training mandatory for certain staff on campus. So that's something that as well is in the discussion, and moving forward next year, I think Tasia has plans to make at least bystander training mandatory for all students. But if there is a specific training as well, I've seen kind of like a few floating around that names of a few floating around in different kind of research that I've been reading, but if there's specific training that you were looking for staff to have, to definitely kind of direct it Councillor Fuzazi's way. Yeah.
Great. So looking down from some questions earlier, Councillor Sohiel, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. First, I want to thank everyone for bringing this back. I missed the last meeting because of a personal reason. Which is why I couldn't give any comments back then, but I would like to give a comment right now regarding this. So even though I wasn't present at the meeting, I was reading through, I was going through the whole conversation going on regarding this topic on social media. And one thing that really disappointed and disheartened me was almost no one really mentioned the international students, people of color, people belonging from religious minorities and cultural minorities that are present on campus. There's a huge population of international students on campus, international women on campus who come from countries where gender segregation is not only very common, but it's also very normalized to an extent where it's a lifestyle. And when these people come to campus in Canada, you can't just expect them to just switch their lifestyle in like 1 month or just 1 year. So while they educate themselves and just settle in Canadian culture, they need a safe space to go to the gym. I'm talking about international women right now. And it's very common for most of the international women who come from parts of the Middle East, parts of Africa. It's common and it's very normalized to go to the gym without men being there. And I think this does provide them a safe space to go there and work out. Secondly, regarding the religious minorities on campus, there are plenty of women on campus who observe the concept of hijab. They wear a hijab, and by that, what it means is they have certain boundaries when it comes to men. Note men, it doesn't just include cis men, it includes trans men, and it may include everyone who presents them as masculine. I think these hours, they're only 2 hours. I think these hours also provide them with an opportunity to just go to the gym openly and not care about these boundaries for like 2 hours for the whole week. And I do agree that these 2 hours are not inclusive at all towards trans people. So which is why I wanted to hear some feedback. I'm not sure if everyone talked about it in last meeting, but I wasn't there. Regarding what if we push for some other hours that are inclusive to queer folks, trans folks, non-binary folks, and anyone who feels vulnerable in the presence of cis masculine men in the gym, because gym can be a very vulnerable and toxic place for a lot of people in a lot of different communities. So that is one of the comments I just wanted to make real quick. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Sohiel. Councillor Burke, I see you have a comment in response. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I can't tell. Am I unmuted? I am? Okay, perfect. My Zoom just kind of like went off the chart. So if I do happen to just like mute myself or don't notice questions in the chat, they might need to be verbalized. Anyways, my apologies. Yeah, so I just wanted to comment and say that religious accommodations, that's a really great comment, because that was something when we originally presented these hours to Pierre that we did know that there are many religions, including like Orthodox Jewish women who are unable to exercise in the presence of men. So it's really also a nice kind of note to hear about other international students that we should also include it kind of in that conversation as well. So thank you for that. And then in terms of the feedback that we've been hearing from trans students, so some of the comments that we originally got when female hours came out was when it came out as female only hours was very a lot of concerns around trans students not being included, which kind of, as we had mentioned at our last council meeting, wasn't the intention, unfortunately, just a miscommunication in the original email that was sent, as we didn't get to see it before it went out. So that's part of the reason why we tried to be explicitly clear that it was inclusive of those students when clarifying the email. But what we have heard is still just kind of concerns around how this will be implemented in a way that would be safe for those students, and making sure that they feel that that space is inclusive of them, even though it is stated in general. There's more that needs to be done in that sense. So I wasn't sure if that answers your question, or if there's more specific kind of feedback that you were looking to hear about.
Yeah, that answers for the most part, but the specific feedback I was looking for was regarding, was there any feedback in terms of separate hours for?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah, I did hear one comment, or in the one kind of answer to our feedback survey was that it would be nice to see kind of positive space hours, which some campuses have, including women only hours, where it's hours specifically for members and of a gender minority. So keeping that separate. I had a few other comments when speaking with students from the transgender community about this, and I kind of asked, would it be appropriate to maybe leave one of these hours as a gender minority hour and one of these hours as a women only hour? But there was some concerns that you know, some students might feel like some students might kind of take that as a you're not like women, you're not enough of a woman to come to these women only hours, so therefore we have to separate you and make separate hours if you're a gender minority, or you're a trans woman or non-binary in that sense. So I've kind of heard feedback on both sides of that, but I will say that I could bring more kind of I could do a little bit more searching myself, because I have seen other schools that have implemented positive space hours. So I could send that your way if you were interested, kind of what that looks like on other people's campuses.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Great question. We have another question from Councillor Kraus. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm kind of taking off my hat as social science senator, perhaps, and coming in as like the president of Catalyst. And for those who don't know, perhaps know who Catalyst is. It's a group on campus that essentially advocates for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. Fantastic group, lovely people, in short. But like coming from Catalyst, we chatted earlier this week, and we've heard our name thrown out several times, and it's very, very disheartening to hear and be tokenized as this like student group, and then continue to not be consulted, which is, you know, it's frustrating because like we heard last council meeting, I was kind of looking for it in the notes, but it wasn't captured, that we were going to reach out to Catalyst. So we were like, woohoo, you know, this is great. We're kind of awaiting that message, and it was never received. So, you know, there's two pieces to that. You know, we're looking forward to that, and we don't want to approach you after, you know, not being consulted the first time. We're kind of hesitant to reach out that second time, right? But then secondly, you know, it kind of shows where you stand with Catalyst as a larger group. If we're just being held, you know, as we're going to reach out to Catalyst, is that to, you know, perhaps redirect criticism? That's how it feels in the end. So I'm curious if there are plans perhaps in the future to collaborate with Catalyst, because that's, you know, a group of perhaps, I think we have 10 executive members who are all lovely, lovely people who are looking forward to having, you know, someone reach out, but we were just kind of left waiting. So, you know, taking off that hat as senator. So I'm curious to see if that would be something in the future that could happen.
Go ahead, Councillor Burke.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Councillor Burke, I think you're on more than one device.
Yeah, my other device just like Zoom just went crazy and wouldn't even let me turn it off. So I joined on my personal computer, and I'm trying to get as far away as I can so I can't hear myself talk. Hopefully that's better.
Great. Yeah, no, it sounds perfect.
I don't know if it is. I'm going to keep walking, but I can talk while I walk. Basically, I think that's a really great comment to know. And I will say that we haven't reached out to anyone for specific consultation yet, just because it's almost exam season. So we thought it really like wouldn't be the most appropriate to ask students, especially students who this might be like a more personally hitting topic for, to provide us with consultation unless they like had just reached out to start. But we're hoping from the feedback survey that we can like identify other students as well to consult with, and then begin those larger conversations in the new year. But I do like really appreciate that comment, and also in recognizing that, yeah, there's definitely like more that we can do to make sure that group feels that we're not just ignoring them and using them as like kind of, yeah, and not tokenizing that group. So I just wanted to as well just say like that I appreciate bringing that comment forward as the president.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Councillor Noss. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a larger question, which is kind of like indirectly related to this. I was just wondering into the status of whatever would have happened to the Social Justice Committee / Caucus. And I was just wondering that maybe if we had such a body in place at the beginning of this academic year, they could have been consulted on issues like this beforehand, before it gets to the point where we are currently seeing ourselves. So I was just wondering what kind of status it's at currently.
Yeah, Councillor Burke, do you know anything specifically about that group?
I think Councillor Ehler has
probably, sorry, Councillor Ehler, I see your comment. My apologies.
What I can say is that this like was something that we were looking at in the summer when this group wasn't established. So that's why it wouldn't have like originally come to that committee. And then as well, like we had no kind of prior, like when the email was sent out from the fitness center, and I don't want to throw the fitness center completely under the bus, because as well, it's the onus was on us there as well. But we didn't know like when specifically things were coming out, which is another reason why kind of we were surprised by the email response. And now I'll just ask if Councillor Ehler's comment was specific to.
Yeah, please, Councillor Ehler, go ahead. My apologies.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that question. Yes, so I'm answering this because the Social Justice Caucus would be technically under my portfolio, since the Social Justice Coordinator is one of my staff. And all I'll say is that we do have full intention of bringing this to light and having a Social Justice Caucus. It's not something that's fallen off my radar whatsoever. It will just be implemented early next semester instead, because of complications this semester, but it will be up and running very soon. And you're definitely right. It's unfortunate that it wasn't in place for this conversation specifically, but hopefully in coming years, we'll have a foundation to get our boots on the ground with that caucus from the get-go. But as Councillor Burke had said, because it's a new sort of thing, it's taken a little while to get to where we need to be.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments on Empower Hours? Go ahead, Councillor Kraus.
I just wanted this more of a clarification question. So they're going to continue as is for right now?
From my understanding, yeah. So we have been speaking with Pierre. There was one specific concern that we did hear regarding like how staff were told to kind of work these hours that we were reaching out with Pierre to talk about and just ensure that like students' identities won't be questioned at the door. It's just going to be a given that, you know, it's Empower Hours and that sort of thing. But other than that, in our kind of conversations with Pierre, he wants to continue these hours as they are, just under the new clarification for the time being. And then maybe my other comment that I can just say while I'm here right now was just like, I know maybe some people are hesitant to provide their feedback in council format in settings. And I encourage you to also reach out to me at my email, and as well, if you'd rather reach out to Councillor Fruzesi or Councillor Robinson have expressed that she would be happy to also handle some questions on this. And I hope in the new year to kind of provide like a summative feedback document on what we've heard for a little bit more transparency to council.
Great, Councillor Burke. Thank you so much. I think that document would be a great idea. Is there any further questions or comments? Okay. I'm seeing no further questions or comments, so we're gonna close the Empower Hours discussion for now in this meeting, but reminder to email Councillor Burke, Councillor Fruzesi, Councillor Robinson, any questions or to set up meetings to discuss this further with them. So we are going to move on now from open forum to reminders. Does anybody have any reminders that they would like to share? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Burke.
Yeah, sorry. I know I wasn't here for the passing of the agenda, which is why I wasn't able to see if it would be okay to add an item for open forum. But it was more of so I was just wondering if that would be okay.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. What's with the item?
Yeah, Anne Comfort have just reached out to me because the executive of the university is interested in signing a document called the Scarborough Report, which is specifically on Black and students of color and supporting those students. So I can link it, or I had it up on my other computer and now I don't, but I'll really quickly drop the link. But if anybody had any comments on that, I'd be really interested to hear them so that I could pass them along for the Mount Allison executive to consider before thinking about signing this report. And
And I will, or maybe it's, I think it's the Scarborough Charter is the full name. And maybe something that I will add as well is that a few other universities has signed this. So you may be able to look on a few other universities' websites to see what people are saying about it. But yeah, I just didn't have any comments. So I wanted to make sure that council had the chance to also provide their feedback.
Okay, great. Are you going to drop that item in chat? Okay. I'm thinking, Councilor Burke, how long is the document? It's difficult to read and prepare questions at this current moment. How time sensitive would be, would comments be on this?
It's a longer document from my understanding. I don't know how time sensitive it is. I reached back and they said they're like kind of waiting to hear from a few people on feedback, and specifically I think Ivan's office. So I'm not sure right yet, but I can ask. Oh, I think Councillor Kraus beat me to dropping the charter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kraus. Councillor Burke, it would be great also if you could maybe circulate that via email to all the SAC members.
Yeah, for sure. I apologize too. Anne didn't send it to me. She had just sent me the name, so I had to find it online. But I will try to download a copy and send it off.
Great. It might be best in the interest of time, and since not all members have likely had the chance to read this document, to further discuss comments or questions at our next council meeting, or direct them via email towards you so that you can pass them on to Anne Comfort.
Yeah, not looking for a discussion today, just looking for feedback sent to my email. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. So with that, we'll get that document circulated as well to SAC members, so please direct your comments to Councillor Burke. So we're now going to move on to reminders. So Councillor Ehler, go ahead with your comment.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just a December food box reminder. So if you're interested in getting a food box for December, orders are due Wednesday, December 1st by 4:30 p.m. And that's an email to Nancy and payment by cash to the Massey office.
Great, thanks. And go ahead, Councillor Penny, with your reminder.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple all entertainment related. So this Thursday, we're going to be having some meditation sessions with Karen Geldarr. She was kind enough to put them on for us. So they'll be in the Maui Donk on Thursday. You can check the Masu Instagram for all the specific details. Friday will be Last Class Bash. Tickets can be purchased in advance, not at the door, in the Masu office any day of the week, 8:30 to 4:30 until tickets sell out. So we only have 200 tickets available for capacity. You must be a current Mount A student, so no guests, and of vaccination and ID and student ID will be required at the door. So keep that in mind when purchasing your tickets. All the details are in the Facebook event, which I should just copy and paste into the chat. As well, Saturday, we're going to be having a paint night in Gracie's. And then next Monday, we'll be making grilled cheese, the entertainment committee, and handing them out in the student center. So all of those event details will be on the Masu Instagram, and then the Facebook event link is now in the chat. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Penny. Is there any other reminders? I have a reminder on behalf of the grad class exec. This Wednesday night is a holiday sweater party in collaboration with improv. So please come to the pond, graduates, enjoy some lovely improv and a festive sweater on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Lots of stuff on the social calendar to come. Does anybody have any further reminders? Go ahead, Councillor Burke.
Just reminder that this is going to be our last council meeting before the winter break. So I hope you all have a lovely winter break and get to take some time off. And we'll see you hopefully in person in the new year.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that, Councilor Burke. Yes, so this is our last council meeting before the break, but always email over the break. I hope everybody gets a chance to maybe relax and unwind. Holidays can be hard for some people, but I hope you all get a chance to enjoy some time to yourselves. With that, if there's no further reminders, I'm just going to wait another moment. Okay, I'm seeking a motion to go in camera. Thank you, Councilor Nolan, and I'm seeking a seconder. Thank you, Councilor Penny. So I'm now going to ask all students at large to please leave our meeting. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your attendance, and it's always lovely to have you here. I'm going to stop recording the meeting now.